You are listening to In Artversation, a discussion program as part of Warin Lab Contemporary Podcast, a podcast that explores art and sustainability. I am Sukontip Nakasem and I'm your host. What is it that makes owning art inviting and satisfying? Is it the potential of 2 or 10 times return on investment? Is it the act of selecting, purchasing, and making personal aesthetic decisions? What do art collectors do when their tastes change and they outgrow their collection? How does collecting contemporary art define who you are? In this episode, I reached out to 2 highly regarded art collectors in Southeast Asia. Jim Amberson, a Singapore-based collector who has been collecting for over 2 decades, and Petch Osathanugrah, a Thailand-based art collector whose highly anticipated contemporary art museum will push the envelope for the local art scene. We discuss the journey of collecting contemporary art and what it means to them. Here's a conversation. Jim, can you please describe your art collection?
I've been collecting for a bit more than 20 years. And I would say that my collection is predominantly contemporary Southeast Asian art. There are a few kind of exceptions, but the majority of the collection is artists from Southeast Asia, produced or works that were made in the last, for the most part, this century. I have some works that go back. I also have kind of a bit on the side a collection of photography, and the photography works are including artists from other parts of the world. But sometimes there's overlap between artists from Southeast Asia working in photography, but those are sort of two different areas.
I'm quite an early collector of international contemporary art in Asia, and I've collected both Thai contemporary and international contemporary art since around early 1990s, could be 90 or 89. I was buying Montien Bunma, a very significant and influential contemporary Thai artist who passed away, and including other Thai contemporary artists. But in about 1992, I went to the US and I started to buy international contemporary art.
Do you have a theme in your collection?
Not particularly. I think there was at certain points in time when I thought, I should be collecting works that have a particular thought process or theme or something. But I don't think that a personal collection is the same as having something curated for a specific exhibition or something. I think art collectors who think, I have to have this one theme, maybe that's fine for them if that helps them organize their thoughts. But I don't, if there's a work that I come across that I'm moved by, I'm not going to say, that doesn't fit into my theme, so I'm not going to purchase that. So I think that's one thing that early collectors think, we need to go and have this structure for it. It's not a museum. It's a personal collection. I ultimately think that at the end, I read this somewhere, but I agree with it. At the end, a collection of art becomes a self-portrait of the collector. That ultimately it points things out in terms of who is the individual or individuals that were part of creating that collection. And it really helps provide insight into that individual, the different things that move that person, that collectors, what their interests are, what their values are, what sort of challenges or things I think it says a lot about the collector. And let's face it, we are all very complex people, we have a lot of different parts to our personalities and our interests. And so I don't think it makes sense to try to really limit that to one specific theme or medium or such. But if that helps someone else, fine. That's what they've decided.
The first 20 years also, no direction, no theme. As years gone by, I was getting to be more serious as a collector, and I wanted to build a private art museum. And about 7 or 8 years ago, I realized that I could not just collect everything that I like. Mm-hmm. So there needs to be some kind of focus or direction. And I asked myself, what should it be? What is or what was the core of my art collection? Of course, it was international art, but what was the core? And the answer that I gave to myself was the Thai artist, Montien Bunma. I thought he was the core, and I still think strongly that he is the core. And so about 7 or 8 years ago, I started to collect more Thai and international art with the goal of making them have to have dialogue with Montien's work, which is very conceptual, but at the same time spiritual and concerns human condition and suffering.
When you go about doing that, you do it all by yourself, or you have help from other people?
Mostly by myself. Until recently, I do have an advisor. The collection has started to grow, and now it's very big. It's all, I lost count. It's probably almost about 800 pieces. And I realized that the storage was getting full, and so you need some advice, or else you would make mistake and expensive one. Not only that the number of the collection grew, but also the level of quality has been lifted up to very high international standard. I mean, of getting new acquisition with a very high quality is expensive. Every collector, I believe, has made lots of mistakes, but I realized that being a serious collection, and I still have a museum project which is coming up in a couple of years, and we cannot afford to make that much mistake, and so I do need to consult with a few trusted advisors.
What do you do with the artwork that you had collected and you have passed that point in your life already? What do you do with those?
I would say that maybe 10 or 20% may not be high international museum standard as the rest. You hide them. You don't show them.
I see.
Never show good art with an inferior piece.
Right.
And unless you want to tell the story of how you started to collect, which I might, and then you might have to mix them up. But it's a kind of storytelling. If you know what you're doing, I think it's okay. I would say that from being like a regular collector, then I pass on to become a serious collector. Now I am a very experienced collector with good eyes. I make very little mistakes. And most of the pieces I acquire now are very high international museum quality. The good thing about my collection is that it's not generic. I don't collect brand name artists. I don't buy them because they are famous. And I don't buy them because I gotta have this famous, artist in my collection. I don't do that. In fact, if there are too famous or too trendy, I intentionally avoid buying them, no matter how good they are. They are already expensive, too trendy, and everyone has them. And for the visitor, they won't be discovering anything new. But of course, although you want the audience to discover something new, it has to be very, very good.
Jim, what influenced you to decide which work to acquire for your collection?
How does that piece resonate? How does it move you? I mean, does it make you go, oh my, it grabs you? I think that's important. That sort of, you sort of fall in love with the work. I think that those are important. But to me, it needs to go beyond just the aesthetics. It needs to be more than just something pretty. I tend to know the story behind every one of the works that I collect. That to me is really important, to understand how a work fits into an artist's practice, what sort of issues the artist is trying to work through, and why they are at this particular point in their journey that led to the creation of that particular work. To me, I think those are all key elements to understand the context of a work. So there are works that I've seen that I love the work, but when I start understanding more about where the work fits into the artist collection, what sort of issues the artist is thinking about, and I think, oh, well, maybe that's not quite as compelling as I thought. And there are artists where I'm really interested in the topic that they're dealing with, the issues they're trying to address through their practice. And that becomes much more of what I'm collecting as opposed to the specific object that is, in front of somebody. I think a really good example is that, conceptual artists, often the object that you buy is really, ephemeral. It's not, it's not something that is object based, but the ideas that the artists are dealing with, the themes that they're trying to address in their practice are really compelling, and that ends up driving the decision to purchase that work. It's a bit like dating, if you think about it. It's, you can go out on a date and you meet someone and you're like, wow, I'd like to get to know that person. And then sometimes after you meet, you're sort of like, oh, I don't think I want to spend more time with that person. And other ones, you might say, oh, they're really not that pretty, but wow, they're super interesting and super great. And I think I want to spend a lot of time with them, that person. So I guess it's a bit like that.
I think you make it very clear, because a lot of time I would think that when you fall in love with the artwork, you purchase.
Yeah.
And now you're saying that you fall in love, but when you start to know the story, you decided against it. So that is very interesting.
Yeah. And I think the thing is there are some collectors who never sell anything. They kept everything from the very beginning. And there are other collectors who, particularly those who see art as an investment, who flip. They'll buy something, say, aha, I think this artist is going somewhere, I'll buy it, and then in a short period of time, or at some point soon they sell it. I'm not that type of a collector. However, I have sold things that I had purchased because I fell out of love, you know, and I outgrew it. It no longer really fit. And I thought, well, should it spend all of its time in storage where nobody has a chance to love it? Or should I give someone a chance to be in love with this work? Typically, if I do sell a work, the first place I call is the gallery where I purchased it and said, you kind of know what I collect now, and you realize that work that I bought from you so many years ago really no longer fits into it, into what I'm collecting or what I'm living with. And quite often galleries have actually said, not surprised, kind of thought that the kinds of things you're interested in now don't really fit, that work doesn't fit anymore with what you're currently collecting. And so sure, I can find a home for somebody who would fall in love with that work. And so I think that happens, and I think that's fine. That's more the way I try to do it. Occasionally the gallery's not around or such, and then you have to resort to the auction houses or such. But that's not for me the first choice. The first choice is to say, bring it back to the gallery, or to place it in a museum where I think it's the right place for that work to end up.
Is it important to you that you need to meet the artist?
I think, to me, that's one of the greatest joys of collecting contemporary art, is the opportunity to talk with the artist, understand their practice, the issues that are of concern to them, how the artwork fits into their life and into larger dialogues, which artists inspire the artists who I'm interested in, and why. And some of my dearest friends are artists that I've met through the process of collecting their works, and we've become dear friends. And you realize that there's a symbiosis between the collector and the artist, and that they'll talk to me about what they're working on. Sometimes I might give some comments or suggestions, but it's more I want to hear what they're talking about. But also I can often help them realize some of their projects, or make connections with museums or curators or others about their works. Sometimes get them acquired by the museums that I'm connected with. And I think that goes beyond just the conversation and understanding a specific work, or why they chose the title they did, or what they were thinking about at that time, where the inspiration came from. But I think there's really this partnership that is there. One artist in particular, who Ilan, she asked me to do an OVR interview for her for Art Basel. And for her, she thinks the relationship with the collector is very key to help her achieve what she wants to do, because ultimately we're the ones purchasing the works, displaying the works, caretakers for the works. So there's this relationship there, and I think that's really important. In my early stage of collecting art, I bought predominantly modern masters from Southeast Asia, because there were books on them, and I could read the books to understand those artists and kind of train my eye. But I could never talk to those artists, because most of them had passed away. And I started to realize that there was something that just wasn't there that you couldn't get from the book. Now, there have been artists that I've met where after I've met those artists, I'm sort of like, well, I'm not so sure about this person or this work so much anymore. And I guess getting back to the metaphor of dating, it's sort of like it wasn't really such a great encounter, and that did have an impact on the works I collect.
Sometimes you make mistake, small mistake. Can you explain what mistake is? Can you give us some example?
When you use your eyes and your heart to connect and look with the artworks, you don't usually make mistakes. When you think and analyze before you buy, when you tell yourself that I should have this piece because of that, then mistakes happen. Because the mind makes a lot of mistakes, but the eyes and the heart don't. You know what I mean?
Yes.
If you use your eyes, you look at an artwork, use your eyes, use your aesthetic sense and your heart. If you connect with the work, you don't make mistake.
So it's an intuition that you use.
Intuition is always right. Careful, analytical thinking makes mistakes.
Does it mean that you don't do homework before you buy?
I do homework after I am interested in an art piece or an artist. I do homework. For example, I was telling you that now I am very passionate about an artist's work, and I couldn't sleep last night. American photographer. And I bought a photography book by Robert Shore is his name. I didn't even know his work when I bought the book like 5-6 years ago. I think I bought it in Bangkok, and I opened it up. It looks so trendy, so contemporary, but it's so unique at the same time. And some pictures were so like ordinary. I mean, he took pictures of very simple objects and simple places. I walked into a gallery in Berlin a few days before Berlin Art Week opened. And I was happily surprised to see Stephen Shore's work on the wall. I was so excited. I selected 8 prints on the wall with no research. I just used my intuition. I just told myself I have to be alert and aware. It was almost like a meditative walk from one piece and look. No thinking, just look. Of course, I knew what I was looking for.
When you talk about getting to know the artist and getting to know what their work is about, and art that's new, I think there's a difference between art that's by an artist that you don't know, and then you need to kind of do your research, understand it, talk with the gallerist about what's behind it. But then there's a whole separate group, which is the artists that I collect in depth. So there's certain artists where I have, half a dozen or a dozen or more works by that one artist. And there I might look at those works and not necessarily need to do as much quote unquote research, because I understand their practice, and I'll look at that new work and say, aha, this is how that fits in. This is where they're going. This is really interesting. I really find this incredible. And some of the artists I've collected have completely changed mediums. So for example, Ilan, who I mentioned earlier, her early practice and the works I first collected were photography, her photographs. But over the last, I think, 5+ years, she started to do more community-based work where she works with a group of weavers from Sabah, where she's from, and they have woven these mats. And the mats are absolutely gorgeous. Some of them are quite large. There's a phenomenal one at the National Gallery, Singapore, that's probably 10 meters. I mean, it's enormous. It's huge and so beautiful, so complex. So she started this project. And when she first started doing this, I'm like, wait a second, you're one of the most gifted, wonderful photographers. Why are you doing this new medium? And it took me a little while to kind of catch up with her. And once I had done that, then I was like, I see where this goes. And her most recent exhibition had combinations of her photographic works as well as the mat weaving works. And you start seeing how they come together, because some of the issues that she's concerned about, which are things dealing with Sabah, the rights and the people there, the local community, as well as the impact of colonialism on the peoples of Malaysia. And her photographic practice and the mat weaving practice, you realize they're talking about the same things, and it's same themes, same topics, same point of view, but it's not, you don't need to have the same medium. You can try, artists can express themselves in completely different mediums. And I think increasingly there are collectors who look at artists who are a multimedia practice artist. So it's no longer they just paint, or they just do sculpture, or they just do photography, or they just do video. Instead, you'll see artists where, wait, they're doing all of those things, and it gives them an opportunity to approach issues and themes from different points of view, different ways that people interact with those works. Because we interact differently with a two-dimensional work on a wall than we do with a three-dimensional sculpture that we're walking around and encountering from different angles, as well as a video work where maybe we're wearing the headphones and it all sort of almost appears inside of our heads, in terms of what we're experiencing.
So what you're saying is, like, when you meet with the artist behind the work, that also expand the social side of collecting, the human relationship side of collecting as well.
To me, what's kind of interesting is in the early days when I was collecting, again, it was a lot of the masters, or so older works, and at that time, a lot of the artworks were through the auction houses. And the auction house, by definition, is putting collectors in competition with each other. And so you're competing with someone else to be able to purchase a work. The other person who likes the same thing you like, rather than being your friend, they become your enemy, because they're going to make you have to pay more to be able to acquire the works, or vice versa. And I think in Singapore, it was like that for at least the first 10 years that I was collecting. It was very adversarial, because the auction houses played a big role. Then as more galleries opened up, that sort of started to change. But finally, about 10+ years ago, more galleries in Singapore started showing more artists from the region. And we were able to go and develop a relationship with a gallerist who is representing that artist and has a relationship with that artist. And those artists would come into Singapore for artist talks, or to be there at their openings. And you could, the collectors or people attending the exhibition could talk to the artists about what they're doing and get to know them. And I think that's where the social part of collecting really blossomed, is having those direct relationships. And it moved from being adversarial in the art auction world to being much more collaborative. And instead of saying, aha, he or she likes the same artist that I like, I should like, they're going to cost me money. Instead being, they like the same artist I like, there's probably a lot more we have in common that we can talk about and enjoy. And through those interactions with other collectors, I've been introduced to artists that I didn't know that are now, I've bought works and added to my collection because they just fit together. They made perfect sense. And these are all really from encounters I had with other collectors.
Talking about social side, a large part of contemporary art is the art scene.
Yeah.
What type of art event do you attend? And please share with us what role the social events play in collecting contemporary art.
Obviously, there are events like art fairs, biennials, various exhibitions that I go to, and there'll be receptions or things where you get to meet other people who have a similar interest or passion, and so that's something I enjoy. But it's not the number one driving force. It's more like I'm there to see the art and there to see the works, and I'm not there just for the social part. I'd like to see that, but I mean the social part's wonderful. It's a great part of it. I think to me, I'm on some museum committees, and those are really important to me because I learned so much. I think that's the ultimately the underlying part is, I mean, I've made a lot of great friends through the art scene, and some of my very best friends that way. But I think the part that I find really important is how much these new friends or these events or the people that I meet help me learn so much more. And I think that's the part that is really, really incredible.
I think before the coronavirus pandemic, I really enjoyed traveling to the art fairs, like Art Basel in Switzerland and in Hong Kong, etc. And gallery dinner was fun and enjoyable. You get to know other collectors, and sometimes you get to talk to the artists. And by sitting next to him, of course, after I have bought his work, then I want to sit next to the artist and chat. It's important because I think the social events makes art collecting more fun, more of a social thing. Although when looking and buying, you don't need any social event.
As you add to your collection, what do you learn through art buying?
Good question. I never asked myself this question until like a few days ago. I knew that I was passionate. I knew that I was too passionate. It's like sometimes I stay up so late, and to think of the artwork that I'm interested in. For me, it's a spiritual journey. For me personally, I'm not talking about other collectors. If you are not aware, then you could lose yourself too much into what you're passionate about. In a way, it makes you suffer. What I'm learning is spiritual lesson. I have to, I can keep on looking and buying art, but there should be an awareness in the back, meaning you cannot just use your passion and your mind or even your heart. There has to be like an awareness, a spiritual awareness that knows what you're doing. And this is what I'm learning. Even if you have the best collection of art in the world, you won't be happy for long. You will want to have some more. And you will never be satisfied with what you have. And the process of looking and buying art, instead of making you happy, it will make you suffer. And so what I'm learning is a spiritual lesson.
Okay, there are a couple of parts. One, when you are collecting new works by new artists, that artists that are not currently in your collection, it gives me an opportunity to research an artist's practice, look into the kinds of media that artist is working with, the issues that he or she or they are dealing with, why they're interested in those particular issues, and how those themes might resonate with myself. So I think that I find really exciting, to go and learn a new way of thinking and a new way of seeing. And I find that really exciting, whether it be, and this can also be new medias for myself. So for example, over the last couple of years, in part because of the pandemic, I added a lot more video artwork to my collection, because you could see that on your screen and it was exactly what it was going to look like when you got it into your home. So that helped kind of move me in a new direction, because I had not previously thought about purchasing something like that. But then there could be other artists where I don't know their work, but when I meet the gallery and I talk to the gallery about what they're dealing with, all of a sudden it seems intriguing. I mean, I think the recent piece I bought from you is kind of fits into that. Didn't know his practice, but then when you start understanding his issues with sustainability, his issues about pollution of the seas, the impact upon coastal communities in Southeast Asia, and yet he's able to talk about that in a very beautiful way, it becomes really, really quite interesting. And I think, I only have one other artist in the collection that has used textiles as part of their practice. But the textiles that this particular artist did, also Indonesian, were the result of a performance, as opposed to a textile work as a final artwork.
A lot of art collectors admit that they are obsessed with art. They can't stop thinking about it. What do you have to say about that?
I think that's completely correct. For me, my boss sometimes says I'm a full-time art collector and a part-time insurance person. Insurance is my career, work career. And I think he's actually right. I mean, between it's the collecting, the studying about it, I find that in many cases much more interesting than the actual purchase. The research and learning about it, I mean, keeps everything fresh, keeps you excited and learning and growing as a person. And I think that's a life journey. I think most of my weekends, my vacations are built around going to a museum or going to galleries, and seeing artists, or studio visits. Those are the things that I enjoy doing. I was chatting with a curator at dinner earlier this week, and he's like, well, I just went to Istanbul for the biennial, and I've been to Documenta, and I'm trying to fit in, Venice and things. And I'm like, your idea of work is my idea of vacation. And he just sort of laughed and he said, I guess you're right. But I think it helps drive. And so yes, it is an obsession, but it's a passion. And I really enjoy that. But I think there's one other thing that's come up out of this, which I did not expect. When my father retired, he said, I used to be an engineer, as though his identity was all in the past and that he had nothing that was defining him in the present after he'd stopped working. And I don't know, somewhere around 10 plus years ago, all of a sudden people started calling me a collector. And at first I was I was like, is that me? But then I started to realize, I guess that's what had happened. I don't know if it was when I got my first storage space or my second storage space that I said, things have really changed. And now most people I know me first as an art collector. If you Google me, the articles about art collecting come up long before anything that I've done involving my work career. And I realized that I now have an identity that is not tied to my job. And so when I do stop working, I won't be stuck in that sort of lack of identity that my father had when he stopped working, because I have this whole world persona and friends, but also an interest that is lifelong, that's going to, a passion or obsession that's going to keep me going after I stop working. And I think that was something I never anticipated. That wasn't part of the plan, that, that would become such a key part of who I am.
Collecting contemporary art is intriguing. It's a pleasure addiction that shapes people's life, and every collector has their personal journey. Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like what we do, please subscribe and share. See you in the next episode.